Hello, my name is Alec Bolton, also known as Sandy, and I will be giving a series of talks on history to my Stevenson University class, which has been canceled because of the coronavirus epidemic. But I hope these videos might be of interest to other people as well. Today's talk is titled, I Hate History, with quotation marks. Oftentimes when I first meet people and they ask me, what do you do for a living? I say, I'm a history professor. They mumble or they change the subject. Or sometimes they will say, oh, I hated my history classes. And I hear that more often than I would like. And if I pursue the question and ask them why they hated their history class, they say, well, it's all memorization. Just memorizing all these names and dates, and it just made no sense. I'd like to respond and say that there are three characteristics of good history or good historians. And the first one is not memorization, but it's imagination. So let's take some examples. Imagine you're a 13-year-old slave boy in West Virginia in 1863, and you see some guys in blue uniforms come onto your plantation, and one of them says, hey kid, you're free. What goes through your mind? Can you imagine the situation? Suddenly finding out that you're no longer a slave, you're a free person. Well, for Booker T. Washington, one of the first things that came into his mind was, I would like to have an education. So he walked from West Virginia to Hampton, Virginia, where there was a school that had been recently set up by the Freedmen's Bureau. And he made a deal with the head of the school that he could not pay for his tuition, but he'd be glad to sweep the floors or work in the mess hall, do whatever he could to get an education. I think probably a number of you have had a similar situation. I think everybody at some point in their life has worked in food preparation. Well, for Booker T. Washington, he worked at the school for 4 years, took classes, graduated, was such a good student that the head of the school said, Booker, how would you like to be a teacher here? So Booker T. Washington says, yeah, that sounds good. And a few years later, the head of the school came to Booker T. Washington again, said, there's an opportunity to open a school in Tuskegee, Alabama. Would you like to apply and become the head of that school? And the rest, as they say, is history. Booker T. Washington went to Tuskegee, Alabama, established the Tuskegee Institute, now the Tuskegee University, and was able to get donations from wealthy philanthropists in the North and in the South to teach African American boys and girls what was called at the time industrial education. Teach them jobs in carpentry and plumbing and brick making, and for the girls textile making. In 1895, Booker T. Washington gave a famous speech at the Atlanta Exposition describing his social and educational philosophy, which was basically start with what you have. Cast down your bucket where you are was the famous line. For Northern philanthropists, look to the South and try to build up the South and to be a partner in business with the South. For Southern whites, look to your African American population for labor, and don't turn to immigrants where you have a population ready and willing and able to do many of these jobs. So try to imagine what it was like for Booker T. Washington to go from slavery to becoming one of the most famous people in American history and American culture in his time period. Let's take another example. Imagine you're a girl who is the sixth daughter of Irish immigrants living in upstate New York, and you watch as your mother slowly withers away and dies from giving birth to 11 children during a lifetime. She dies at the age of 46. So you become obsessed with trying to spread the word on birth control. You've watched and seen how having many children destroys the lives of families, and particularly of women, particularly of immigrant women, in this time period. Try to imagine being an immigrant family, being a mother of 2, 3, 4 children, and the effect that would have on your life. And try to imagine how having many children would destroy a woman's life and the family's economic opportunities over time. So imagination, that's a very important part of being an historian, of doing good history. The second thing I think a good history always has is a sense of context. How do the lives of Booker T. Washington, how does the life of Margaret Sanger reflect the time period in which they lived, the larger context, the larger picture of life in America during, this is roughly the post-Civil War period, Reconstruction, Gilded Age, through the Progressive Era. And I think you can see some common themes in Margaret Sanger's life and Booker T. Washington's life that were relevant during this time period. This is a time period of dramatic economic expansion, of industrialization, of urbanization, of immigration into America, feeding the factories with low-cost labor. And both Booker T. Washington and Margaret Sanger had solutions to the problems that were confronted by this massive transformation of American society during this time period. So context is very important. And I think this also illustrates a skill that is useful not just for historians, but in many walks of life, of going back and forth mentally between the small picture and the big picture. Can you keep these two perspectives in focus at the same time? Looking at the small picture, seeing how that fits into a larger pattern. That's important for historians. It's important for many people in many different professions. Okay, so the third is relevance. And I think it's clear with the examples of Booker T. Washington and Margaret Sanger that the issues that they confronted in their lifetimes are still relevant to us today. Immigration, urbanization, industrialization. We live in a new world today, but still issues of race, issues of women's role in society, issues of gender and sexuality, issues of racism, issues of abortion, still very relevant in American society today. So again, these are the three major characteristics that I associate with good history and good historians' work. We will be pursuing these ideas as we continue in successive videos. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll watch the next one. Thank you for watching.